In the early 1960s, America wasn't just obsessed with speed, it was addicted to it. Drag strips were the new battlegrounds, and the big three automakers, Chevy, Dodge, and Pontiac, were locked in a brutal arms race. Each one was cramming bigger, meaner engines into smaller, lighter bodies, building what were basically factory-legal race cars. Chevy had the Z11 Impala. Dodge was rolling out its Max Wedge Beast. Pontiac had its Super Duty Catalinas. These weren't just cars, they were weapons on wheels, created to win and humiliate the competition. But while those brands were racking up wins, Ford found itself in a strange position, behind. For all its engineering might and racing pedigree, it was losing ground at the strip. That is, until 1964. That's when Ford decided to stop playing nice and unleash something so wild, it would change drag racing forever. When the 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt hit the scene, it didn't just enter the race, it rewrote the rules. At first glance, it looked like a regular Fairlane, but that illusion disappeared the moment you heard it growl. This wasn't a muscle car for the street. It wasn't meant for cruising, flexing, or showing off. It was created with one mission, to obliterate the quarter mile. Everything about the Thunderbolt screamed purpose. It was less a car and more a guided missile, laser-focused on speed, built to destroy anything foolish enough to line up next to it. Ford didn't care about creature comforts or style points. This was payback. This was Ford's revenge. And under the hood, that's where things got truly insane. At the heart of the Thunderbolt was an engine so aggressive, it barely belonged on public roads. Ford ripped the 427 cubic inch V8 straight out of its NASCAR program. No compromises, no detuning, no mercy. This thing came armed with a forged steel crankshaft, high-compression cylinder heads, and dual 4-barrel carburetors stacked on a towering aluminum intake. And those massive ram air snorkels? They weren't just for show. Cold air was force-fed through the headlight openings, dumping oxygen into the beast like a turbocharger without the delay. Officially, Ford rated it at 425 horsepower, but no one believed that. In reality, this snarling power plant pushed closer to 600. It didn't just move the Thunderbolt, it launched it like a rocket. With drag slicks and just a bit of luck, it could tear down the strip in the tens. But the engine was just the beginning, because Ford wasn't done stripping sanity out of this machine. Ford didn't just add power, they carved away everything that didn't make the Thunderbolt faster. This wasn't a diet, it was a full-blown purge. Steel body panels, replaced with fiberglass. Even the front bumper, hood, and fenders were swapped out for lightweight composites. The windows weren't glass, they were plexiglass. Sound insulation? Gone. Heater? Deleted. Sun visors? No. If it didn't make the car faster, it didn't survive. Inside, the Thunderbolt was just as brutal. A single fiberglass bucket seat for the driver, a basic rubber mat instead of carpeting, and a lightweight battery moved to the trunk for better weight distribution. It looked and felt like a factory car that had been through a war, and in a way, it had. Ford wasn't building a vehicle for comfort or showrooms. They were crafting a dragstrip assassin. But raw speed isn't just about power to weight. The Thunderbolt had to survive the punishment of high RPM launches, and Ford made sure it could. The Thunderbolt wasn't just light and fast. It was built to take abuse most cars couldn't survive. Ford knew that all that power meant nothing if the car twisted itself apart on launch. So they reinforced everything. The suspension was re-engineered with heavy-duty components, including special traction bars and race-tuned springs that could handle brutal torque without buckling. Out back, a savage 4.56 rear gear helped the Thunderbolt explode off the line like a grenade with wheels. The rear axle wasn't stock either, it was beefed up to handle clutch dumps that would snap lesser cars in half. Every inch of the Thunderbolt was built to withstand the chaos of high RPM launches and violent acceleration. It didn't drive, it detonated. But here's the wild part. Under NHRA rules, this monster still technically counted as a production car. And that loophole? That's where things got really interesting. By building just 100 Thunderbolts, barely enough to meet NHRA's homologation rules, Ford pulled off something genius. They created a factory-built drag car that was, by the rulebook, street legal. But this wasn't some marketing stunt. The Thunderbolt was a ready-to-race monster, handed straight to privateers and race teams who were hungry for domination. And dominate they did. In 1964, Thunderbolt started showing up at drag strips across the country, and immediately started winning. It wasn't close. Super stock and Ace/FX classes became Ford's playground. Racers like Gas Ronda, Butch Leal, and Dick Brannon turned the Thunderbolt into a certified legend, mowing down the competition with terrifying consistency. Tracks that once echoed with the sounds of Mopars and Chevys were now shaking from the roar of the 427. Ford hadn't just caught up in the drag wars, it had taken over. And that kind of success? It didn't go unnoticed. The Thunderbolt did its job a little too well. By mid-1964, it was clear Ford hadn't just entered the drag wars, they nuked the battlefield. The NHRA, seeing the Thunderbolt obliterate everything in its path, stepped in fast. Rule changes were pushed through to kill the loophole Ford had exploited. The goal? Restore fairness to the sport. In reality, it was a quiet admission that no one else could keep up. And just like that, the Thunderbolt's reign ended. Ford, knowing the game had changed, pulled the plug almost as fast as it had flipped the switch. After producing just around 100 units, the Thunderbolt vanished from the factory floor. But its legend? That was already locked in. The Thunderbolt had proven what Detroit was capable of when the only goal was pure, violent, unmatched speed. It didn't just win races, it changed the rules of the game. Today, the 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt is more than just a car, it's a myth on wheels. Most were raced to death, their frames twisted, engines rebuilt, and bodies patched up after countless battles down the strip. Finding one in original condition is nearly impossible. But when you do, when you see that bulging hood scoop, that bare-bones interior, that ominous Thunderbolt badge on the fender, you're looking at a relic from a time when car companies built monsters, not models. The Thunderbolt was never about comfort, style, or even practicality. It was born in a skunkworks lab, raised in the chaos of drag racing, and let loose like a warhead with a VIN number. It didn't just conquer the quarter-mile, it carved its name into the asphalt, one pass at a time. And though its time in the spotlight was brief, the shockwaves it sent through the industry are still felt to this day. The Thunderbolt wasn't just fast, it was a warning, a reminder of what happens when a company stops asking what's allowed and starts asking what's possible.